Welcome to the Four Peaks Parents Podcast with Thomas Miller. Are you tired of your tween, teen, or young adults' dysfunctional behaviors holding you emotionally hostage, controlling your family, and ruling your life? Do you feel like you're riding an emotional roller coaster every time you walk into your house? If you answered yes, then you're in the right place. This podcast is a community for courageous parents just like you who come here to gain effective tools, skills, learn concrete action steps, and take power back so they can change their tween, teen, or young adult's life and change their family's future. So welcome to the Four Peaks Parents Podcast with your host, Thomas Miller. This podcast is a dream that I've had for, almost 23 years, ever since I graduated from NYU with my master's in social work and became a licensed clinical social worker. I've been providing psychotherapy to children, tweens, teens, young adults, and of course, their families. And for the last decade, I've been coaching parents all over the U.S. on how to reset their family dynamics and how to bring their family out of the chaos and dysfunction and towards higher functioning and healthy family cultures. This is your community resource. This is a place for parents to come and to learn tips, tools, strategies. There are no dumb questions. We'll talk more about how you can ask me questions and even get more access from this podcast and the greater Four Peaks community. It's called the Four Peaks Parents Podcast because I'm the founder of the Four Peaks Parents Program, which is a results-driven step-by-step process where I take families across four peaks that will allow them to lead their family forward. So one of the things that we're going to talk about today, which is pretty central to most of the coaching work I do, it's pretty much sort of ground zero where I begin most coaching sessions, is to figure out what the heck do we actually control as parents, right? First off, it's the hardest freaking job in the world. I could say that. I'm qualified. I got two kiddos, two boys, and I got a tween and a teen right now. And so as much as I am a parenting expert, trust me, I fail every single freaking day. It is so tough, right? And things are changing all the time. And there is a bazillion and one things outside of our control, right? I mean, we will definitely dive into so many of the risk factors and what are kind of the etiological factors, the things that are driving the mental health crisis right now in the US for sure. And we'll talk about social media. We'll talk about the climate and how things are certainly driven toward instant gratification, how so often kids are going to choose the shiny, pretty thing ostensibly over delaying gratification. We cannot control, right? Our kids' friends and or our kids' friends' parents, right? We cannot control what's happening societally and from a community-based standpoint. However, we must take 100% control over what we can control, right? And we're going to focus a lot on that over this next episode. It's so easy to get overwhelmed and throw up our hands. And let's be real, we all do it, myself included, right? We often default into default settings. It's kind of like with your computer, right? When you have to restore it to its original. We have had great things. I'm sure each of you have had great things modeled for you by parents. I'm sure many of you have had things not so healthily modeled by your parents as well. And or you may have had kind of a bit of both, right? It's a bit of a mixed bag. So as we think about our circle of control, it's super important, again, to think about what can we actually do. And so often families, when I begin, they export their circle of control onto whether it's me as the coach, the school system. It could be something bigger than themselves. Certainly could be Instagram, right? How many of us, myself included, are guilty of getting sucked into the latest and greatest trend and feeling like, right, we need to be these Pinterest perfect parents. And then rather than focus on the very concrete things in front of us, we abdicate, right, those opportunities, punting them right to the kind of bigger ether, and then we feel powerless. And then our kids certainly, right, can get sicker or things can metastasize. One thing you need to know about me and about this podcast is this is all about proactivity. This is all about taking action now. This is not about sitting idly by and eating popcorn, right, as our kids are struggling. And again, sometimes that struggle is an intentional, purposeful struggle that we would allow our kids to struggle. But I'm talking about mental health, addiction, any kind of issues that are metastasizing self-esteem. Of course, we'll dive in future episodes bigger into, ADHD and oppositional defiance and how do we change behavior and how do we, catch our kids being good and positively reinforce them. But for today, I really, really want to focus again on what we can and cannot control. So one of the things I'd like you to do at home, and if you're driving, don't do this. It's definitely not safe, but you could do this certainly when you get to a safe space. Or if, of course, you're brushing your teeth right now, which is also would be pretty amazing if you can multitask and actually draw a circle and brush your teeth. Kudos to whoever the hell can do that. But when you have a moment, please take out a piece of paper and draw a circle. And it's okay if you stare at a blank circle for a while, right? Depending upon where you are in your parenting journey, there are things that have been a little hard baked. I'm not going to lie. The toothpaste is sometimes hard to get back in the tube. So if we're dealing with a young adult or we're dealing with a tween or a teen, some of these symptoms, let's call them, right, or traits or behaviors or norms, which we're definitely going to talk more about in future episodes as well, might already be a little entrenched. That's not to say that we can't affect change. So what you're going to do is you're going to write in this circle all the things you can control. And on the outside of the circle, you're going to write all the things that you cannot. And I bet you, if you're like every parent I've ever coached, and by the way, I've coached hundreds and hundreds of parents and have treated over thousands, I'm in the thousands now, of clients that I've provided psychotherapy to, whether, again, that's individual or family or parents. And again, coaching parents, like I said, for the last 10 years, you're going to have an easier time writing all the things outside your circle. And that's just our tendency, right? Is we tend to export our power as parents and we tend to spin our wheels and get pretty darn frustrated because the things that we want to contrive, maybe we cannot. And again, each of you are going to have unique situations where there could be a litany of factors stacked against you, and somebody's circle could be chock full of things outside of their control, right? DNA, right? Family of origin issues. Maybe one of your child has been exposed to some trauma that was outside of your control, or maybe it was in your control. Who knows? Whatever has happened in terms of their developmental process, and they may have some fixation points from earlier trauma that has kept, your child stuck in a more regressive place. There might be things outside your control, whether or not your child has developmental delays. There might be things outside your control, again, in terms of what are you facing socioeconomically? What are the factors that exist in your community that are pretty actually how great the school is or isn't, how amenable the school is in terms of actually following 504s and IEPs and actually meeting your child's learning needs where they're at. Again, things outside your control. But trust me, if you do anything and you learned anything from this podcast and from me throughout our work, it's going to be, how do we immediately get empowered? How do we immediately take action? And so do not for a second overlook all the things that you actually control. So let's name a few. Believe it or not, taking a breath is in your control. Your timing is in your control. We're going to talk in the future podcasts about timing. And there's a podcast that is going to be called, Are You a Pot Roast or Fried Chicken? I'm definitely more on the fried chicken side. My timing sometimes sucks. I'm such a proactive dad, and I want to kind of cull out of my family I want to kind of eradicate any unhealthy dynamics or issues. And if I see them cropping up, sometimes I'm almost overly proactive and I can be a bit of a fried chicken where I need to learn to sit back. And my wife is way more of a pot roast. And we'll talk more about how we avoid splitting. And many times we don't avoid getting split, and we also get weakened in that process as well. We'll speak to that in future podcasts. So think about even taking space. That's a choice. Addressing something. That's a choice. Your tact and tone, which we'll talk more about as well in future podcasts, right? How are we approaching our kids? How are we communicating? Are we setting limits? Are we setting boundaries? Believe it or not, choosing the choice as opposed to letting the choice choose you. Are you, again, if you're more on a pot roast side or a little bit more of a laissez-faire parent, might you need to be more proactive? Might you need to get more involved and fly at a different altitude and maybe land the plane a little bit more and get out of the cheap seat, so to speak, and into the arena and get some sweat equity going in terms of addressing that thing? If you're overly involved, right? If maybe if you're being honest, right? Maybe you're a little bit of a helicopter mom or dad, right? That's a choice. And maybe we need to kind of pull back and allow our kids to fail forward and allow them to individuate. What are the expectations in your household, right? What are the norms around swearing, and don't get me wrong, my kids definitely swear. They have seen Deadpool. So I blame it all on Deadpool. No, I'm just kidding. But even things like that, right? What are the norms around family dinners or lack thereof? What are the norms around bedtime? What are the norms around how conflict is handled? Can your loved one just isolate for hours? Social media, 100% is a thing, right? That's outside our control. And oh my God, are we going to spend several podcast episodes talking about social media and how to try to manage and bring value there? But we certainly always can control something within something. So even if you're a teen, let's go with a teen, hopefully, not a little guy or girl, is in a relationship. And we don't really love this person, let's be real, right? Let's say we don't actually think this is the healthiest human being on the face of the earth for our little bumpkin. How do we handle that? That's a choice. And again, tact and tone and or verbal versus nonverbal communication, our stance, are we asking open-ended questions? Do we just turn a blind eye and kind of fall back into, again, the way we were parented or fall into traditional parenting traps and just hope that things get better? Hope is not a strategy, people, right? So we've really got to think about, even with something outside our control, again, let's say it's an issue around a teacher, not the most effective teacher, probably should have retired 40 years ago, one of those teachers, unfortunately. Do we just blame this teacher and get really frustrated? Or do we, depending upon the age of our child, do we have to have a meeting with that teacher? Should our child have the meeting on their own? Should we empower our child to have that meeting and to really take stock of their own circle of control? Should our child be tested? Should they not be tested? Should they have an IEP? These are all things to start thinking about. Again, choosing to let something go, believe it or not, is a choice. I was working with a mom very recently who her son has basically emotional dysregulation issues. Most likely the diagnosis would be, more on, old school model would have had him at bipolar 2, which there's no more diagnosis for little, tweens and teens, thankfully, right? So there's disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, right? And so he's more on that dysregulated side, and he will become dysregulated really late at night. And believe it or not, her choice is to tell him, right, that he needs to go to bed. And if he starts pushing back and swearing, she'll say things like, I'm choosing not to address the swearing right now. We'll deal with that tomorrow. But for right now, the greater good is that you need to go to bed. And she'll work with him to try to get him to bed, because sleep regulation, which we'll definitely talk about in future sessions, is super, super, super important. So even if you choose not to address something, stating that to your child, that's a choice. So the point of this exercise is to really center down to the cellular level all the little micro choices we have. And so I really hope that you take time to fill that circle. Yes, fill the outside. Yes, feel powerless for a hot minute, right? Feel overwhelmed because there's 85 million things that we can't control. We definitely can't control our past, but we can control whether or not we feel guilty about maybe some of the choices we've made. I definitely have overreacted as a dad in the past and said some things I wish I could have back. I can't control that, but I can control holding my kids accountable now and not allowing that guilt to make me lack the tenacity to set them up for success and actually front-loading clear expectations and or holding them accountable and or providing natural consequences. I also can control whether or not I do a little mindfulness breathing before I walk in the door if I'm feeling a little crispy. Can control whether or not I try to take something on when I have only 25% energy that probably requires about 90%. So there's always choices that I can choose or you can choose as a parent to address something that maybe you didn't do so hot in the past, right? We can try to create what's called the corrective emotional experience today by looking at how we can bring a little shift, a little value, a little subtlety to that old guard kind of behavior or old guard kind of way of parenting. So next episode, we're going to dive deeper into the circle of control and really get an understanding of where you are and how you can bring shift in those things in and outside your control. I hope today brought you a lot of value. And remember, take extreme action, right? Take extreme accountability today, okay? Don't wait. Don't let things metastasize. Have a great day. Be well. Bye. Hey everyone, Thomas here. 2 quick things. First off, it means the world to me that you took the time to listen to my podcast. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Number 2, while you were listening to the show, who was the one person that you thought could really benefit from this episode? And please share it with them. Also, if you haven't already, please sign up for my mailing list so you can get instant access to my free community. Here you will be able to connect with other parents in similar situations, as well as access my regular Q&A sessions where you can ask me anything and get headed in the right direction. The link is in the description.